Oswald lone assassin advocates don't want you to know about this ignored physical evidence. In grateful memory of Dr. Cyril H. Wecht. The Warren Commission report on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy is the Bible of truth for lone assassin advocates. And its foremost commandment is that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone assassin of America's 35th president on November 22, 1963, in Dallas, Texas. Oswald acted alone. There was no conspiracy, foreign or domestic, period. End of discussion. Any talk to the contrary will get you labeled as one of those crazy conspiracy theorists. And yet the one mystifying aspect of the lone gunman versus conspiracy debate is how the Warren Commission handled and presented evidence in its 888-page summary edition and its 26 supplemental volumes that became the official historical record of President Kennedy's assassination. Lone gunman espousers see the Warren Report as the definitive answer to the Kennedy assassination, its findings virtually without flaw. Any talk of more than one gunman or a conspiracy are to be dismissed as the rantings of a lunatic. Conspiracy theorists are accused of offhandedly dismissing the circumstantial evidence against Oswald as the lone assassin. They are seemingly under the spell of original conspiracy theorist Mark Lane, the pioneer researcher and author, who said, "The best way to disbelieve the Warren Report is to read it." The Warren Commission and its report became necessary when Jack Ruby, in this iconic Bob Jackson photo, shot and killed Oswald 2 days after the assassination, thereby ensuring the historical record would not be a public trial of the accused assassin. Lone assassin advocates readily accept the evidence and findings of Oswald's guilt in the Warren Report as historical truth, giving no credence to the fact that the accused was denied legal representation and police custody from his arrest to the moment Jack Ruby gunned him down. Even more alarming, the accused was also denied any legal representation before the commission hearings. Conspiracy theorists object to the commission's acceptance of evidence without challenge or cross-examination in defense of the 24-year-old deceased accused assassin. Even more troublesome to me and other conspiracy theorists is the way the Warren Commission and its investigative agencies dismissed, ignored, altered, or even suppressed witnesses and other evidence that suggests that Oswald did not act alone or may not have been an assassin that day. Of all such evidence found in the Warren Report, there is a profound example of Mark Lane's claim that the best way to disbelieve the Warren Report is to read it. It is troublesome physical evidence that lone assassin believers don't like to talk about, just as the Warren Commission decided to ignore it. Interestingly, what became known as the single bullet theory was adopted by the Warren Commission to explain that a recovered bullet, Commission Exhibit 399, caused all the non-fatal wounds on JFK and Connally, which is why the Zapruder film shows them reacting to their survivable wounds no more than 1 second apart. This bullet, CE 399, allegedly went through JFK and Connally, shattered 2 major bones in Connally, and emerged in nearly original condition, missing only 2.4 grains of metal at its nose, which you can see here. That's almost the entire damage inflicted upon this bullet after having caused 7 wounds on 2 men and breaking 2 major bones. So for the commission to be able to say that all the non-fatal wounds on JFK and Connally were caused by 1 bullet, CE 399, fired by lone assassin Oswald, it ordered the FBI to conduct ballistic tests to show that this bullet could cause all 7 wounds on the 2 men and emerged with such minimal damage? The commission put itself in quite a dilemma, and here's how. Ballistic tests that prove the single bullet theory to be viable gives credibility to the lone gunman conclusion, whereas ballistic tests that disprove the single bullet theory establishes at least two gunmen. Regardless of all the circumstantial evidence against Lee Harvey Oswald, nothing establishes guilt or innocence of the man as a lone assassin more than the single bullet theory. Here's why. In Zapruder frame 230 below, JFK has emerged from behind the Stemmons freeway sign. His hands are at his throat as a natural reaction to the first shot striking him in his upper back, disrupting his breathing. Governor Connally, seated in front of Kennedy, does not yet appear to be reacting to being hit by the same bullet, CE 399. Although the single bullet theory demands that the governor has also been hit by the same bullet at this moment. The commission says this bullet, Commission Exhibit 399, ripped through Connally's chest, displacing the fifth right rib, and upon exiting his chest, shattered the distal radius bone in his right wrist before lodging in a shallow wound in Connally's left thigh. The problem is that JFK is seen reacting to his non-lethal wounds as early as Zapruder frame 225 below, as he emerges from behind the highway sign. Connally appears unhurt. Approximately 1/4 of 1 second later, Zapruder frame 230 shows Kennedy clearly reacting to the non-lethal bullet that struck him in the upper back. Connally still does not appear to be hit by the same bullet, but the commission says, in fact, he has been hit in frame 230, suffering 2 major broken bones among his 5 wounds. However, the commission does not explain how the governor could still be holding on to his white 10-gallon Stetson cowboy hat with his right hand, despite the bullet blowing a hole completely through the distal radius bone in his wrist. So in this picture here, 230, there's the governor is right here. There's the white brim of his Stetson hat. His wrist is right here. He's still holding on to a very heavy 10-gallon Stetson cowboy hat with the wrist the commission acknowledges was shattered by the bullet that first struck President Kennedy. It isn't until frame 236 that both men can be seen reacting to their non-lethal wounds. Connally's mouth flies open as he screams out in pain. His right shoulder buckles, he lets go of his Stetson hat, and he begins to recoil into the lap of his wife, Nellie. These collective frames of the Zapruder film, frames 225 to 236, leave the Warren Commission with only 2 possibilities. 1. Lone gunman. Kennedy and Connally were both hit by the same bullet, CE 399, thus making the single bullet theory and a lone gunman possible. 2. A second gunman. Connally was hit by a separate shot fired almost simultaneously to the first shot, thus disproving the single bullet theory. Of course, the Warren Commission adopted point number 1, which was necessary for the government to name Lee Oswald as the lone assassin of President Kennedy. This is also the belief of lone nut supporters. So, lone assassin advocates explain this. While the single bullet theory prompts a massive debate both for and against it, the late iconic researcher and author, Dr. Cyril Wecht, had the credentials to discuss the controversy and did so with passion. Dr. Wecht, as one of America's preeminent forensic pathologists, points to the Warren Commission's very own ballistic tests as proof that the single bullet theory is the ultimate fairy tale to frame Lee Oswald as the lone assassin of JFK. Keep in mind that regardless of all other evidence in this case, if the single bullet theory can be proven to be false, then it is a certainty that more than one gunman in Dealey Plaza fired at President Kennedy that day. Why is this so? Because the alleged Oswald rifle murder weapon, as determined by the FBI, could not be fired twice in less than 2.3 seconds. Yet Connally is seen reacting to his wounds prior to the time it takes for the manually operated rifle to fire a second shot. Bullets that wouldn't cooperate. All ballistic tests ordered by the Commission were conducted using Oswald's Mannlicher Carcano rifle and identical 6.5mm copper-jacketed bullets believed to be exclusively used in the assassination. As the guest speaker at the Sixth Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza anniversary event in 2017, we used Dr. Wecht's words from that presentation to discuss the ballistic tests. In science, we try to prove or disprove something. So what do you do with bullets? You fire bullets into water or cotton wadding to see what the bullet will look like, having struck nothing of substance. The Commission did that, notes Dr. Wecht. A second set of targets consisted of a goat carcass, which was lined up for a shot through the chest to break a rib to simulate Governor Connally's rib fracture. Then they, the Commission, got human cadavers and lined them up to shoot through the distal end of the radius to simulate Connally's wrist fracture, reports Dr. Wecht. CE 854 at right is the X-ray of the cadaver wrist showing a wound very similar to Connally's wrist fracture. Now, a bit of information in Dr. Wecht's words about the bullet CE 399 that has become known as the magic bullet because of the damage it is alleged to have inflicted. The bullet in its original state weighed 161 grains. The single bullet theory bullet, Commission Exhibit 399, found on a stretcher at Parkland Hospital, believed to have fallen out of Connally's shallow thigh wound, weighed 158.6 grains. 2.4 grains is exactly 1.5% of the original weight of the bullet, states Dr. Wecht. The Commission asks us to believe that this nearly pristine bullet, losing only 2.4 grains of metal at its nose, inflicted a total of 7 wounds on 2 men, including 2 major broken bones in Governor Connally, continues Dr. Wecht. I should mention that bullet fragments taken from Connally at right were given to Nurse Audrey Bell, and Governor Connally also took fragments of metal in his chest and wrist to the grave, notes Dr. Wecht. Author's note: for an unknown reason, fragments were not weighed or forensically tested to match them to bullet 399. For his public appearances, Dr. Wecht delighted in presenting the exhibit below, which shows the single bullet theory projectile CE 399 at far left, grouped with the assorted FBI test bullets. The government put this picture together, not Wecht or his associates, stresses Dr. Wecht, in astonishment of the Commission's blatant disregard of its own ballistic tests. These test bullets, intended to support the government's single bullet theory, in fact, do the opposite when compared to CE 399. Here's how Dr. Wecht described them. The second and third bullets below to the left, CE 572, were fired into cotton wadding, striking nothing of substance, notes Dr. Wecht. These are the 2 bullets here. Commission Exhibit 572, fired into a large vat of cotton wadding. The second bullet from the right, CE 853, is a bullet fired into the rib of a goat carcass, emerging only slightly more misshapen than the bullet shot into a vat of cotton wadding, continues Dr. Wecht. So that bullet is this one, shot into the carcass of a goat to break off a rib, much like what happened to Governor Connally. Notice that the bullet is misshapen and squeezed at the base more than Commission Exhibit 399 here. The bullet at far right, Commission Exhibit 856, was test fired into the distal radius section, wrist, of a human cadaver, notes Dr. Wecht. As Dr. Wecht delighted in pointing out, isn't it interesting that the Commission could only produce a bullet approximating the nearly undisturbed condition of CE 399, when test bullets CE 572 were fired into a vat of cotton wadding, striking a target of virtually no substance? Even more eye-opening, when a test bullet, second bullet from the right, breaks off a goat's rib, just as Connally suffered. This bullet emerged more damaged at the base than the so-called magic bullet, CE 399 at far left. As for CE 856 at far right, the test bullet fired into the wrist of a human cadaver, it caused damage quite similar to Connally. But look at its condition. The wrist test bullet on its own emerged completely squashed, with extensive loss of metallic substance. So there's the bullet fired into the wrist of a human cadaver, which caused a wound on the wrist of the cadaver, eerily similar to what was sustained by Governor Connally. But the Commission says this is the bullet that not only caused similar damage in Governor Connally's wrist compared to this bullet, but this bullet also broke another bone and caused 5 additional wounds. Yet both the Warren Commission 1964 and the House Select Committee on Assassinations 1979 were not dissuaded by the ballistic test results. Both panels concluded that even though the test bullets that struck a rib or wrist bone sustained more damage and metallic loss than the bullet used in the assassination, they both concluded that CE 399 did cause a total of 7 wounds in 2 men, including fractures to Connally's rib and wrist. Did bullets CE 399 follow this flight path to inflict 2 wounds on JFK and 5 wounds on Governor Connally, including 2 broken bones? The Commission had to say it did, or admit Oswald could not have been the lone assassin of JFK. Now you know why this bullet, CE 399, given its highly improbable flight path through 2 men, as well as the physical damage it is known to have caused, has earned the nickname Magic Bullet. As Dr. Wecht always reiterated, it was the Warren Commission people, not Wecht or any of my colleagues, who did these experiments. They choose the representative bullets you see from each target to prove the validity of the single bullet theory. Needless to say, these ballistic experiments did not work as hoped. Even more problematic, the government maintains that CE 399, despite its own experiments, caused all the non-lethal wounds in the 2 men and emerged in a condition that could not be replicated by identical test bullets fired from the same weapon. How is it possible that a test bullet fired into a goat's rib bone or a cadaver's wrist, as seen at right, sustained more damage than bullet CE 399, said to have caused similar fractures to both Connally's rib and wrist, not to mention 5 other wounds? And how could the Warren Commission have dared to still put forth the single bullet theory after every one of its own ballistic tests disproved its viability? Imagine how a jury at public trial would have pondered the single bullet theory when presented with the multiple failed ballistic tests by Oswald's attorney. To conspiracy theorists and truth seekers, it's tragic that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't survive his attack by Jack Ruby to stand public trial. Would these ballistic tests have established reasonable doubt of Oswald's guilt in the minds of a jury of his peers? Like the FBI ballistic tests, JFK Case Not Closed reveals much more key evidence that was dismissed, ignored, altered, or suppressed by the Warren Commission to falsely frame Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone assassin of JFK.